Welcome to Ethiopia Today. This is our major news of the week. Here are the topics covered in the video. Obasanjo briefed African Union Security Council on AU-led peace talks in Ethiopia. Military operations against al-Shabab and Shenee have been effective. The US House Speaker's visit to Taiwan has raised global tensions. Achievements in Ethiopian economic sectors contributed to remarkable macroeconomic performance. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken's Africa's tour. Below are the details, and we invite you to stay tuned. Like and share the video and support the channel so that we reach out to more audience as much we can. And also don't forget to subscribe and turn on notification bell to Ethiopia Today channel if this is your first time. Then you won't miss out the exciting and very important videos we bring to you. Let's get into the presentation. Obasanjo briefed African Union Security Council on AU-led peace talks in Ethiopia. The African Union, AU High Representative for the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, briefed the Union's Peace and Security Council on the ongoing AU-led peace efforts in Ethiopia. The briefing on Thursday took place during his visit to Addis Ababa, where he also met with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Deputy PM and Foreign Minister Damaka Makonnen, and members of the recently formed Peace Committee. The meeting discussed critical developments and preparations for the upcoming peace talks between the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, the AU said in a statement on Friday. The statement also disclosed that the High Representative and former President of Nigeria Obasanjo briefed the AU Peace and Security Council on the ongoing AU-led peace process in Ethiopia. After hearing the brief, the Council reiterated their appreciation and support for the work of the High Representative. The Council also called on the AU member states and the international community to provide the necessary support to the peace process. Peace and Security Commissioner Bankole Adeoye expressed the AU's continued confidence in Obasanjo and the peace process, which resulted in crucial confidence-building measures including improved humanitarian access. While in Addis Ababa, Obasanjo also convened a meeting with UN, US, EU, and IGAD special envoys to the Horn of Africa, according to the AU. The meeting discussed recent developments including the outcomes of their recent visit to Mekelle, the planned peace talks as well as modalities for information sharing. The participants, AU said, acknowledged the centrality of having one peace process under the undisputed leadership role of the African Union. The Council convened its 1097th session for an updated briefing on the situation in the Horn of Africa. The last time the High Representative addressed the Council on the situation was during its 1064th session held on the 10th of February. It is to be recalled that a briefing session was planned to take place on the 4th of May and then on the 5th of July, but both sessions were later cancelled. Both sides have reaffirmed their commitment to the peaceful resolution of the conflict. The government announced the establishment of a 7-member committee for the peace talk. The TPLF also expressed their readiness to take part in the peace process, and reportedly set up a team of negotiators, though the names haven't been disclosed, which raises doubts whether the group's genuine intention to engage itself in the much-needed peace process. The apparent disagreement between the two parties on who should lead the negotiation has been a talking point at this stage. The Prime Minister Abiy's government wants the peace talk to be held under the auspice of the AU, while the rebellion forces prefer peace talks facilitated by Kenya with the support of international partners, including US, EU, UAE, UN, and the AU. The TPLF argues that Obasanjo is too intimate with the Prime Minister Abiy, and they requested the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta to lead the peace talks, which the federal government sees unacceptable move by any justification. At this stage, what we understood is that the peace talks may start soon in Kenya. On the security front, the situation remains relatively calm, although tense and volatile. In May, clashes were reported between Tigray forces and Eritrea, though it did not worsen into a full-blown conflict. During his last engagement with the PSC, Obasanjo stated that we, continue to call on all parties to fully withdraw from occupied territories and to return to their original positions, in order to lay the foundation for the commencement of dialogue and negotiations. One territory that remains major site of contention is Wolkate, the TPLF calls the Western Tigray. Wolkate is a district bordering Sudan in the west and Eritrea on the north, and it was part of the former province of Gondar. However, the region was set to be wrapped into the Tigray regional state by TPLF under its 27 years of governance. Military operations against al-Shabab and Shenee have been effective. The coordinated operations taken against internal and external terrorist groups by the Ethiopian security forces have been remarkably successful, according to Government Communication Service. On how briefing journalists last week, Government Communication Service State Minister Salamawit Kassa said the security forces have proved effective in thrashing the terrorists al-Shabab and Shenee reported. The coordinated military operation against Shenee in Oromia took place from July 23 to 29, 2022 by the National Defense Force and the Regional Special Police, she added. The security forces have eliminated more than 333 Shenee combatants, detained 671 members of the group, and destroyed 69 weapon and food warehouses in the week, the state minister disclosed. It is to be recalled that the temporary command post disclosed that more than 800 al-Shabab combatants, including 24 leaders of the group, were killed. According to her, the security forces of Ethiopia and Somalia have also been conducting coordinated military action against al-Shabab. Operations of the neighbors to annihilate their common enemy is encouraging, it was noted. With respect to humanitarian assistance, Salamawit revealed that the government provided support for more than 3 million drought-affected people in Oromia. Partners and the government have also provided humanitarian assistance to affected people in Somali and SNNP regions. The government also allows unfettered humanitarian assistance to Tigray region, where over 4,300 trucks entered the region. Partners can in addition provide humanitarian assistance to the needy by air or on land. More than 1,081,000 litres of fuel have similarly been transported to the region in the past 3 months, she stated. However, the government is dismayed by the indulgence of the delegation of the US and European envoys who visited Tigray region in echoing the terrorist TPLF's untrue rhetoric, the state minister underscored. The claim that humanitarian assistance is not reaching Tigray is false, as the federal government allowed unfettered humanitarian assistance. Moreover, Salamawit attributed Ethiopia's average economic growth of 7.3% in the past 4 years to mainly the economic reform, but stressed the need for reducing inflation. She further stated that Ethiopia has planted 6.2 billion tree saplings up until now in this rainy season, and over 23.4 billion are planted in the past years. The U.S. House Speaker's visit to Taiwan has raised global tensions. Despite China's warnings, the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taiwan last week. China vowed it would take firm and robust measures to resolutely safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the U.S. side shall bear all ensuing consequences. Urging the U.S. side to stick to the One China principle and stipulations of the 3 China-US joint communiques, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian had said that Pelosi's planned visit to Taiwan must have been cancelled immediately. Pelosi's visit supposed to be postponed to a later date due to her positive test result for COVID-19. Earlier, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian had expressed his condolences to Pelosi and wished her a speedy recovery, but he strictly advised her not to postpone the trip but cancel it immediately. Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Xi Feng urgently summoned the U.S. ambassador to China Nicholas Burns late Tuesday night and lodged stern representations and strong protests over Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi's visit to China's Taiwan region. Noting that Pelosi risks universal condemnation to deliberately provoke and play with fire, Xi said that this is a serious violation of the One China principle and the three China-US joint communiques. It has a severe impact on the political foundation of China-US relations, and seriously infringes on China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, Xi said, adding that it gravely undermines peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and sends a seriously wrong signal to the separatist forces for Taiwan independence. The move is extremely egregious in nature and the consequences are extremely serious. China will not sit idly by, Xi noted. Xi said the US government must be held accountable. For a while, the US has said one thing and done another thing, constantly distorted and hollowed out the One China principle. It deleted the key expressions such as Taiwan is part of China from the US State Department website, put Taiwan in its so-called Indo-Pacific strategy, openly upgraded its ties with Taiwan and increased arms sales to the region and supported separatist activities for Taiwan independence, according to Xi. He said the US government has indulged rather than restrained Pelosi's willful act, leading to the escalation of tensions across the Taiwan Strait and seriously undermined the China-US relations. Noting that the US side shall pay the price for its own mistakes, Xi urged the US to immediately address its wrongdoings, take practical measures to undo the adverse effects caused by Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. The United States must not go further down the wrong path, escalating tensions and making the situation across the Taiwan Strait and China-US relations irreparable, Xi said. He added that the United States should stop playing the Taiwan card, stop using Taiwan to contain China in any form, and stop interfering in China's internal affairs. The United States must take concrete actions to observe the One China principle and the provisions of the three China-US joint communiques, deliver on the Five No's commitment made by the US leadership, i.e., not seek a new Cold War, not seek to change China's system, the revitalization of its alliances is not against China, not support Taiwan independence, not look for conflict with China, and not go further down the wrong and dangerous path, Xi noted. Xi stressed that the trend of the times cannot be reversed, the will of the people is not to be defied, and those who play with fire will perish by it. Taiwan is China's Taiwan, and Taiwan will eventually return to the embrace of the motherland. Chinese people are not afraid of ghosts, pressure and the evil, Xi said. In the minds of the Chinese people, nothing is more sacred than to protect China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and nothing is more important than safeguarding and realizing national reunification, Xi noted. He added that no country, no force and no individual should ever underestimate the firm resolve, strong will and great capability of the Chinese government and people to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity and to achieve national reunification and rejuvenation. Overseas scholars and officials strongly rebuked U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan on Tuesday, saying that the move severely undermines China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, seriously threatens peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, and gravely violates international law and basic norms governing international relations, which exacerbates the crises the globe already experiencing. At the later development, China has deployed a massive amount of military equipment to effectively blockade Taiwan during a string of war games. Taipei has accused Beijing of simulating an attack on the island as multiple batches of planes and ships crossed the dividing line in the Taiwan Strait. They were judged to be conducting a simulation of an attack on Taiwan's main island, the island's defense ministry said. And in response, Taiwan's military mobilized air and land patrols and deployed land-based missile systems. Taiwan's army said 20 communist planes and 14 ships were detected in the waters around Taiwan conducting joint air-sea exercises. At least 14 of them crossed the median line, it said, forcing Taipei to scramble patrol planes to ward off the jets. In a joint statement, the US, Australia and Japan all urged China to immediately cease military operations around Taiwan. The three powers accused Beijing of threatening international peace and stability in the region. And meanwhile, one of Taiwan's leading missile chiefs, Ouyang Li Shaoxing, was found dead at a hotel in Hengchun. Achievements in Ethiopian economic sectors contributed to remarkable macroeconomic performance. Members of the National Macroeconomic Committee underscored that the achievements registered in many spheres of the economic sector have hugely contributed to the improvement of Ethiopia's overall macroeconomic performance. The success in the export sector in particular has contributed significantly to the growth of the macroeconomy, with over $4.1 billion income in the just-ended Ethiopian fiscal year. The Macroeconomic Committee reviewed Tuesday the major economic performance of the year and set directions for the upcoming budget year in the presence of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. In this regard, the committee reviewed that Ethiopia has registered better performance in most of the macroeconomic indicators during the fiscal year. The performance of export trade has taken the lion's share for the remarkable result of macroeconomy, it was learned. In addition to the success in export sector, the citizen-oriented development activities have also performed better, according to the Macroeconomic Committee report. Finance State Minister and member of the National Macroeconomic Committee, Ahmed said priority was given to all macroeconomic sectors during the year. He further explained that a lot of work has been done to diversify export products in quantity and quality, as well as to avoid dependency on only certain products. As a result, better income was obtained from coffee, mining and other sectors, the state minister said, adding that the income from minerals has, for instance, grown by 64% on average. These results have played a significant role in enabling Ethiopia to cope with the domestic and foreign pressures by registering better macroeconomic performance, Ahmed elaborated. Ethiopian Investment Holdings CEO and member of the National Macroeconomic Committee, Mamo Mietu, said on his part that the export sector secured additional $1.2 billion when compared with the previous fiscal year. Despite the prohibition of duty-free opportunity, to Ethiopian goods, the CEO indicated that the export performance of the manufacturing sector has been able to grow by 26%. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken's Africa's tour. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is on a tour of Africa with the announcement of the Joe Biden administration's policy towards Africa as a highlight of visit. It is expected that the new strategy will be launched during the South African leg of Blinken's three-nation junket that will also take his entourage to the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda between August 7 and 12. In a briefing on July 29 ahead of the visit, Assistant Secretary of State for Africa Molly Fee stated that the Secretary will deliver a speech announcing and describing the U.S. strategy toward sub-Saharan Africa. Blinken's country-specific discussions in South Africa, DRC and Rwanda are not to be waved away as unimportant. Still, the announcement of the new policy for the entire continent is the most significant development with far-reaching ramifications in the immediate, medium term, and long term, according to the African Center for the Study of the U.S. at the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. Why is the envisaged policy so consequential? The author asks. First, it is a tradition of most American administrations to institute policy postures towards Africa, whether they are well structured and articulated or merely ad hoc and disorderly. The importance of these policies is that they shape relations across trade and investments, political and diplomatic engagements, assistance through various philanthropic agencies and initiatives, and military relations. For African governments, civil society, businesses, and individuals, reading an American policy between the lines can, for instance, provide a bellwether on where American dollars are likely to flow. Second, it is evident that the administration of Donald Trump, 2016 to 2020, was marked by the lowering of Africa in America's global calculus. To be certain, the Trump administration did not entirely neglect Africa, the author argues. One of the bright spots in the Trump administration's engagement with Africa was the launch in 2018 of Prosper Africa, an interagency entity that provides a coordination mechanism for trade and investment programs. That Prosper Africa continues during the Biden era shows that something good for Africa came from the Trump administration. Nonetheless, the Trump administration did not design a comprehensive strategy, apart from random statements by then officials, such as former National Advisor John Bolton, often predicated on the need for the US to counter China and Russia in Africa. By contrast, the anticipated Biden administration framework is likely to be built around a set of prudently thought-out priorities. Third, and related to the previous point, the last comprehensive US strategy towards Africa was made a decade ago in 2012 by the Barack Obama administration. That policy prioritized the strengthening of democratic institutions, spurring economic growth, trade, and investment, advancing peace and security, and promoting opportunity and development through initiatives in health, food security, climate change and others. While these issues remain relevant for Africa-US relations in 2022, it is incontestable that political, economic, security and geopolitical circumstances have shifted exponentially in the US, Africa, and around the world. The fourth point for why the new policy is important revolves around the unprecedented interest in Africa during the 2020 US election campaigns and the eventual election of Joe Biden as the 46th American president. Throughout the early months of his presidency, optimism was entertained in Africa over better relations with the then new administration. Some of the optimisms were underpinned by the appointment of personalities deemed sympathetic to African causes and interests, the author stated. Space does not allow for mentioning of the hundreds of officials in the Biden administration with a track record in propagating African interests. It can, however, be surmised that old Africa hands such as Judd Devamont, National Security Council's Senior Director for Africa, Linda Thomas Greenfield, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, and Molifi, Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, among many others, have been busy at work contributing to the formulation of the policy. It is also probable that political support for crafting the policy would have received a boost from leaders with a record of promoting African interests such as New York Congressman Gregory Meeks, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, U.S. Representative from California Karen Bass, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Africa, and Delaware Senator Chris Coons. The bigger point is that a U.S. policy towards Africa cannot emerge in a vacuum but must have the stripes of officials and politicians determined to design one. What is left now is to access and analyze the policy once it is publicly accessible, possibly during Blinken's visit. While analysts, scholars and strategists await the formal policy, there are early indications of the key aspects. At least going by Assistant Secretary Fee's briefing in July as a primer for the visit, the policy is likely to include democracy, good governance, and respect for human rights, which are long-standing U.S. values. On the economic front, it can be expected that the policy will include economic prosperity, framed in terms of the promotion of inclusive development. Assistant Secretary Fee also alluded to the possibility of the inclusion of policy direction on matters climate change. A Biden administration's policy towards Africa is good for the continent to the extent that it provides a framework for engagement, the author added. At the very least, such a framework can be critiqued with an eye on refining it for the future. However, a U.S. policy towards Africa should not be mistaken for an African policy towards the U.S. With the U.S. on the cusp of launching its Africa policy, African nations should equally work towards formulating their own policy agenda towards the U.S. I will return to the difficulties of crafting an African policy towards the U.S. It is, however, important to first grasp the value of an African policy framework towards the U.S. First, an African policy framework towards the U.S. would serve as a response to U.S.'s policy in such a way that areas of agreement are implemented, and areas of disagreements are negotiated. A basic premise is that if the U.S. is launching a strategy towards the continent, then Africa needs to do so as well. A diligent review of the foreign policies of African countries as well as those of sub-regional organizations and the African Union shows that well-grounded policies towards the US and indeed other global powers are non-extant. This is a major drawback in Africa's quest for engagement with the US. Second, if the US has a policy framework while Africa does not, it follows that the agenda setter in the relations is one party, the US, and that Africa is on the receiving end of things. Yet, African Agency in International Affairs demands that Africa should be seen as an actor rather than being acted on. Africans cannot expect Americans to develop an engagement framework for them. Americans can be magnanimous in their strategizing towards Africa, but this will always be done with the interests of the American people at the forefront. The onus is on African leaders to strategize for their people. Third, many asymmetries have been noted in the relations across politics, diplomacy, economics, and culture. As can be expected, Africa is on the back footing in its relations with the US for the simple reason that the US is a global power. Yet, Africa can benefit more from the US than it currently does, the writer believes. If Africa looks to effectively engage with the US as a partner, then an African policy framework to help structure the relations is a necessity. The importance of an African policy towards the US cannot be overstated. An opportunity now presents itself as the Biden administration unveils a brand new policy. It can be expected that tons of ink will be spilled in analyzing the US policy. This is quite in order. However, a more rewarding effort on the part of Africans is to devise their own policy towards the US. The question then is, how would Africans go about designing a US policy? Responding to this question raises the conundrum of developing a policy framework that incorporates the interests of 55 nations across 5 regions. This complication can be overcome through a 3-pronged strategy development process. At the continental level, the policy could be led by the African Union and draw heavily on the aspirations of the Agenda 2063, the Continental Developmental Blueprint. The African Union Representative Office in Washington, D.C. would be instrumental in these regards. At the sub-regional level, the policy would be led by the regional economic communities in the 5 regions of Western, Southern, Central, Northern, and Eastern Africa. At the national levels, each country would be encouraged to draw from the continental and sub-regional strategies to craft US policies attuned to their national goals. The diplomatic missions of African countries in the US would play an important role in these regards. The author is Deputy Director at the African Center for the Study of the US at the University of the Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. This brings to the end of our presentation. Thanks for staying with us. Please also like, share, post your comments, and subscribe to our channel. These are the ways you can support Ethiopia Today to continue producing these and similar contents. May God bless Ethiopia and its people. Thanks again.